I'm Kate, owner of 123, a business dedicated to supporting leaders who want to be their best selves every day, because your employees deserve a leader who does their very best. Leading is hard work, but the chairs here at 123 are comfy. Please have a seat and join the conversation. I invited Tony to the comfy chairs to continue an earlier discussion we had about generations in the workplace. This led to further conversation about personal values and tools for identifying priorities. Tony, would you tell me about the type of leadership role you currently hold, how many people report to you, how long you've been doing that work?
Yeah, I've been in acquisition logistics for the Air Force for about 14 years now. And in the last almost 4 years, I've been in a leadership or first line supervisor role. So it's been a real fun ride and a big learning experience for me.
Yes.
Switching from being a worker bee to jumping in as a first line supervisor.
And how many people are on your team?
Oh yeah, so I have 7 people report to me. Some are kind of a senior manager, all the way up to a brand new intern. So
Okay.
yeah, so a wide range of experience.
Have you had any recent experiences where the age or the experience gap has played a significant role in a problem?
When I first came in as a supervisor, it was a little bit challenging dealing with an employee who wasn't super motivated to perform, and it was really like it just was challenging. So,
And you had been coworkers before that, right?
Actually, no, I was brand new kind of into that organization. So it even brought in another layer of challenges. And it's like, hey, there's this 30-year-old who has 10 years of experience, but is going to be now the supervisor over everyone who's older than him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny for me to think about you being 30. So, Tony and I have known each other a long time now, and it's fun to kind of reconnected with him now that he's a professional. I was actually Tony's Sunday school teacher when I was 30, and gosh, you were what, 14? That's what it was. You were 15 the year I turned 30. I have to remind myself that doesn't mean I'm always twice as old as you.
Oh, that's not going to be the case anymore.
English major, not logistics expert.
That's funny.
We were talking earlier, or at least I think it's fun to kind of reflect on the fact that where he is professionally now is where I was at that point, where that was when I was taking on my first really like formal title. I'd been a manager before in retail, but this was my first director title where I was part of the executive team, even though it was a small organization. But that same thing where it's like, oh, this is real.
Yeah, exactly.
Real. I'm an adult now.
Yeah, and it goes so quick.
It does. It all does. It's only going to go faster. I'm sorry to tell you.
I'm experiencing that. Was that something that you experienced as well?
I've been in that seat. Okay. I have a kind of a classic story when I was in my first, director role. I was the director of human resources, and I only had one employee. It was a small organization, so my department was tiny. And we were at a job fair, and it was so funny because my employee was this gentleman that was older than I was. So, I'm like 30, and I would say that he was probably in his late 40s at the time.
I see.
And just watching people come up to our job fair booth and not talk to me. They would go to him So yeah, I have had that experience. Long story short.
Yeah, my first job, I walked in and I had a gentleman that was before then he outranked me like late in an earlier career. So that was a little intimidating. So I was in a unique situation where I was my position was new. So
Okay.
I actually provided a lot more structure than what was had in the past, right? It was still a challenging situation with that employee anyways, but I mean, we worked through it and we had a mutual respect for each other.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the truths is if you're a competent, high performing employee, those things start to not matter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, there are a lot of things that can go into people's perceptions of folks that are older or younger,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in leadership. But if everybody is appropriately focused on the work and working well together, things like, oh, I've been here for 20 years and you just showed up,
Mm-hmm.
those start to fall away.
Right.
Do you see any connection between how you lead and your side gig as a DJ?
That's a good question. Okay, so I wouldn't say how I lead. I would say that I've learned a lot from DJing that has helped me in my career.
Yeah. What are
Um,
those lessons?
I think it's really communication and being able to like confidently address a crowd. Whereas when I first started when I was 19, I was afraid to even speak my name in a staff meeting. So um, that's where like, and I even tried Toastmasters to kind of help me with my speaking abilities. And I've found that DJing has helped with that,
Mm-hmm.
um, as as well as just being better at your job and knowing what you're talking about. I think half of the uneasy times that I've had was when I didn't understand the full picture. So getting the full picture and then being able to talk about it. But anyways, that was kind of a little tangent there, but that's how I've kind of related my DJ career, as I uh, do side gigs with weddings and
Mm-hmm.
corporate events, things like that, and how I relate it to being a logistics manager.
Well, that is a logistics job. If you think there's so
Um,
many logistics associated with it.
you're right, getting all my equipment in and making sure the caterer is ready. So yeah, there is time management and all those like type things involved that um has helped
Yeah,
me. But I think that's just with being a professional anyways, trying to make
that's
sure
true.
that the customer's happy.
Yeah. My fun fact footnote today is that Tony was our wedding DJ as well and did a magnificent job.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank you. We still talk
It was
about
so
it.
much fun.
Oh, good. We took a look at an article that talked about Pew Research and how they're making some decisions to stop always using generational differences as one of the lens in their research. And I know that you read through that and have some notes. So
Hmm.
I'm really curious what insights you gained.
Yeah, so the biggest point that I took out of that article was the fact that when you look at it, generations through a lens like a millennial or a boomer, you start getting, I guess, prejudice
Yes,
starts happening.
I totally
Um,
agree.
when you start seeing someone, you just start assuming that they're going to act in the way that they are in their generation. So for me, that was the biggest takeaway, that if we start taking out the labels, we start being able to, I guess, address other issues, other I guess, injustices that are happening a little bit easier, because there's just another lens that we get to take away.
This is a topic that I've had a lot of interest in over the last few years. Working in an environment that had a significant portion, kind of like you, of the workforce preparing to retire. A lot of newer people coming into that particular industry, specifically nursing at that time. Just a lot of concern about, how are we creating a pipeline? For some people that I've worked with, the concern was more about, well, let's look through the lens of generation to see if we can recruit and retain these people. And what I saw is that it created this very narrow focus on only portions of the population. I remember being in meetings and, other colleagues of mine would talk about, like, well, millennials want this and they want this, like more specific feedback. And I'm solidly Gen X. And I can remember thinking, I want all of those things too.
Right.
This isn't about when we were born. These are the things that employees want in the modern world. So I had an opportunity when I was pursuing my graduate studies to do some actual research on this topic. I found an article that talked about, it may not be that at the time, millennials they were being facetious when they said this, but like self-obsessed or short-sighted. Maybe it's just people that are 25 are self-obsessed and short-sighted.
Yeah.
All joking aside, that what really matters in that space is what stage of life are people at. And that's why I think it's kind of fun for us to have this conversation.
Absolutely.
Because, I remember being at the stage where you are, where I was the younger leader, very, wet behind the ears, made a lot of mistakes. And that's how I started learning. So now that I'm, we'll say I'm more seasoned and more experienced. There are still things that I want from work that are probably very similar.
Sure.
But I'm also much closer to starting to think about what could retirement look like for me, even though I still have another 15 or 20 years, knock on wood, in the workforce, that we kind of all want the same things. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to how are we showing respect for each other. And any label we put on people chips away at that.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I kind of forgot a point that I just remembered. When I first started in the government, they did have a generational difference class that I took, and they literally put up the slides like, this is what a millennial is. This is what a Gen X is. This is what a boomer. And it's just like, yeah, not everyone fits into those molds. And so it's just becomes just not effective in how we communicate with each other. I think.
One of my arguments against the generational labels is the fact that there's no defining authority. And that's a red flag to me, that this could be directionally interesting, but it shouldn't be the thing we base our decisions around people's employment experience. It can create this sense of conflict when it shouldn't be there. The okay boomer movement, or I think I've said this to you when we were talking, that my caution to people is if you take out the generational tag and put in any other identifier, the way we talk about the generations is, frankly, it's highly discriminatory and problematic. Millennials have ruined the housing market is one of the titles I remember seeing, a headline. And, let's take millennials out and say Catholics or women or people of color. Right. And that's a really bad thing to say.
Exactly.
So why have we made it okay?
That just because you're this age or in this age range,
Mhm.
like there's a big gap in the age ranges
Yeah.
for the generations
Right?
labels.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
using air quotes.
yes.
You can't see them.
No, they can tell. Labels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you first, I mean, you said you took this class and they tell you, okay, you're a millennial, so this is what you are.
Oh, I was probably like 20 years old when I took this class.
Gosh.
So just imagine that.
So you're like, oh, is that what I'm supposed to be?
Yeah. So,
Jeez. Can't imagine you at 20. Even that seems grown up. But you're totally grown up. I apologize. Let's
okay.
When you entered leadership, did you have that filter on looking at your people, or were you trying to fight it? I guess is kind of I'm not asking this well.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I try not to have many filters, but you end up just within you still have them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's hard not to judge, but you still end up judging. I don't know. It's just hard to explain, but
Oh yeah. Well, we're wired that way. It's a survival mechanism.
It's a pain.
True.
It's like, why am I thinking like this? But
yeah, to keep yourself safe.
yeah.
I mean, that's really it's a whole issue of bias.
Mm-hmm.
I had a chance to attend a webinar last month that the gentleman's, his kind of catchphrase is, if you have a brain, you have bias.
Mm-hmm.
And bias exists because we have that amygdala, like, protective system that our senses are constantly scanning our environment and making decisions about what's safe and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And what that translates into is we make judgments. It's entirely natural. What's important, though, is to be intentional and to be, self-critical, like critical thinking. Unfortunately, for lots and lots of reasons, there are a lot of people that think that those judgments are true. And they default to that. So, again, our intelligent thinking person's responsibility, if we want to be good citizens of the world, is not to hate ourselves for the fact that we have bias. It's to recognize that it's ingrained in survival of our species. I can't say that word out loud. And what do we do with it?
Right.
You don't always have to act on a bias. You can recognize it and set aside. And that's, I think, we want to talk. I want to make certain we're very deliberately talking about, leaders' responsibilities in this conversation.
Sure.
And that's something as a leader, whether you're older or younger, whether you have, more relevant experience or less, whether you're new to the organization or not, male, female, any of the, again,
Right.
descriptors you can put in there. Are you paying attention to the assumptions that you make?
And then if you're acting on those assumptions, that's where you can get yourself into trouble, I think. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with.
Thank you.
I think as you age, you become more aware of how your decisions are impacting others, and whether or not how you're leading, and is whether or not it's effective. And the feedback that people give you is saying, no, that wasn't really a good idea, Tony, or yeah, I really like the way you handled that situation. So it's getting that reaffirmation. So yeah.
I think this is a good place. We've talked before about identifying your core values as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that recognizing that you can impact other people, knowing what you value, and really influence that behavior. So I would love to hear what you're thinking about in terms of your personal values.
So actually, I before we talked a little bit earlier, I didn't know what my core values were, and I was okay with that because I know I have values. I just hadn't ever thought of them and kind of rank them as far as what I really value.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier, and I went online and I literally Googled and went to multiple search engines, just looking at words that stood out to me as like what really identified with me is what I valued over other things. Because we all have lots of values.
This is true.
It's just figuring out which ones mean the most.
Yeah.
And what I learned today in preparation for this is that other people are interested in wanting to know your core values. So
Particularly
anyway,
the people that report to you.
yes.
Yeah, it matters. It's what I thank you for affirming me.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things, and this will be my soapbox moment, one of my many, one of the things that leaders have to do better early in their leadership career than later is define what's important to them. You can talk about that as values. You can talk about it as your leadership story. There are a lot of ways to articulate it or to frame it, but it is an essential part of successful leadership.
Exactly. So
tell me.
Yeah. So I found 5 that kind of resonated with me, and I ranked the first one to be respect. To me, if you don't have respect for yourself, for others, for your organization or mission, in my case, working for the Air Force, just it's really hard to work together and to get things done. So that's what I valued first, and then integrity, doing the right thing no matter what, is also something that's important to me. Having those difficult conversations with employees when it's needed is important to have that. And yeah, so the third one was something that I kind of summarized, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one.
Please.
I summarized as cohesion. It's something that I didn't see in all of the lists, but it's something that popped into my mind, and that having a team be cohesive and know their part and really effectively do their job and their piece of the puzzle is just really, really important to me. I couldn't rate cohesion above the other two, but just that stood out to me. I also kind of on the way over here thought of like, well, what if someone leaves in your organization? Is that team going to still be effective without that person? So say, for instance, someone got promoted, and so are those other employees going to be able to absorb that workload or not?
Yeah, if you lose one person, does everything fall apart?
Right. Or if a leader leaves and
Mm-hmm.
a new leader comes in, have you set up your team for success, for cohesion? So that was something that really resonated with me. And then for the fourth one, I almost chose change, but I didn't. I chose flexibility.
Okay.
And as a little bit more general. So flexibility meaning that in any given time, like, you're going to look at someone's, I guess, answer or look at your own bias and see whether or not you can change, you can adapt to that person's mindset or whatnot. So I thought that was pretty important to me. And then the last one was trust, in somewhat relation to respect, kind of rounded out that if you don't have trust amongst your employees or in any relationship, then it just kind of all falls apart.
Is that, to clarify, and the answer may be both, is that trust that you value people having trust in you, or you value being able to demonstrate trust in others?
I think it's both. I think it's mutual trust, and I feel like trust and respect kind of go a little bit hand in hand. But yeah, it's that mutual trust, because if one person doesn't trust the other very well, then I mean, you still don't have a good relationship. So I think mutual trust.
It's interesting. Integrity and trust are closely related too. I love the way you defined it, doing the right thing no matter what. You know this about me. I like to kind of talk about what's the meaning behind it. I love words. And integrity and trust have some of the same, like, very ancient roots. And it's this idea that it's something solid. In fact, if we talk about like the integrity of a wall, or say, if I used to like to do this when I was in like a high floor number conference room to talk about integrity, because I could be like, I'm pushing on the window because I know it has integrity. I'm not going to fall out of the 13th floor because I can trust the integrity of this construction. So there's kind of that same thing going on there, that it's this beautiful echo between you want to trust people, you want to be trustworthy, and your actions are going to show in your integrity to do what's difficult sometimes, but is it right? And that's a way that you demonstrate respect for people too. So it's kind of beautifully wrapped up. And then cohesion and flexibility, I think, have sort of a fun interplay with each other too, right? Because you sometimes think about cohesion as being like stuff is all glued together. But you're also looking for openness and adaptability in that cohesion.
Is the mold going to go kind of come together if something goes awry?
Yeah. Those are wonderful. How does it feel to have those defined for yourself?
I think it's great. It kind of is a stepping stone, I think, and building, I guess, kind of just my leadership mentality. I don't have a better word for it right now.
It's a perfect word for it.
And how I make decisions, and what I talked about a little bit earlier was, I kind of went over this with one of my employees and talking about these core values, and she was just so like, well, that's awesome. Like, I feel like I need to come up with my core values too. We should do like a connect session on it. So a connect session, for those of you who don't know, it's just a monthly touch point to bring teams together in the Air Force. So
great.
So yeah, I'm now charged to go introduce that to the team.
That's fun.
And the fact that one of my employees is super excited about it is very motivating to me. And then also just to learn about, well, what values does my team have? Not just sharing my values. I want to know what motivates them, and without having those frank conversations is sometimes hard.
The danger in talking about your values is it's going to create accountability for you. If you're like, I really value respect, but then you show up and you're not as respectful as you could be.
Sure.
It's
but it's
Oh.
something that I want, right? As this first line supervisor who's looking to advance in the coming years, I want to be accountable.
Good. That's fabulous. I will be very curious, when you have the chance to do this with your team, to hear kind of what type of values show up. I suspect there are going to be a lot of very similar ones because of the field that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be curious to know whether or not you see any differences based upon people's, quote unquote generations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I definitely am looking forward to learning a little bit more about and seeing if it matches up with what I think that they would say, right? Like,
oh yeah.
And that bringing that next layer in there and be like, well, that's kind of surprising. I wouldn't have thought that so and so would have chose loyalty. Well, that's a bad one because I would want everyone to be loyal, but you know what I mean. There's
like,
some.
Oh, I didn't expect that.
I
from
feel like
you,
there's.
Kate.
I feel like there's some core values that are like lesser than others, but that's just.
You want to talk about bias?
That is bias. Oh man, this is all coming together.
Well, no, that is another. I mean, that's a point. Because what we're talking about, you said that one of the reasons that thinking about, assumptions around generations is important to you is because you want to eliminate ageism.
Mm-hmm.
Something like a conversation about value, what is it that you personally value, can help you expose what are some of the assumptions I make.
Right.
If I'm nearing retirement, do I think that anybody that's entry level, early career, that what they value is money?
Mm-hmm.
Just making up
Sure.
a horrible stereotype, or they don't care about work. It's a way to counter some of the assumptions that we make that are negative.
Sure.
Yeah, because I predict that most of the team is going to have very aligned values. And anybody that's an outlier, you probably have other concerns with, if you do have any performance issues that you're dealing with, that they would be the people that kind of stand out because our values drive our behaviors.
Something that I guess I'm a little bit passionate about is the Eisenhower box.
Oh yeah.
You're familiar probably.
I am.
Yeah. It's actually helped me kind of reduce stress a little bit and help me coach others.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Eisenhower box is? The Eisenhower box. Please tell us about it.
Yeah. So the Eisenhower box is a kind of a graph where you have the importance on one axis and urgency on the other. And specifically, it encourages you to not do the things that are not important and not urgent, like checking your phone or checking social media during the day, or in my case, sometimes mindlessly scrolling through my latest 10 emails that I've already read. Like, and then at the top part of it, or the like 100% and 100%, those are the things, the urgency and the importance. Those are the things that you go and do and you take care of. And then if it's not urgent, but it is important, you need to decide when to do it.
Yeah. I love a good 4 square model.
Yeah.
And just for people that may not have seen this one before, if I may.
Yes.
Just to kind of visualize, if you think about, a grid with 4 boxes, it's this idea that you can go on a continuum of urgency from low to high. and that usually runs on the the X, right?
The x-axis.
Yeah. And then the Y is importance.
Correct.
And you just plot.
Right.
And you may feel tempted to be like, oh, this needs to sit near the line or not. But if you're just thinking in this quadrant way, it's where does this task fall?
Right.
And then it lets you, as you've started to point out, determine this may be urgent, but it's not super important, or it doesn't need to be done right now. But the stuff that's urgent and highly important, that's where you need to focus your energy. And it lets you naturally prioritize
Correct.
the work. It's a great tool. Where did you encounter it?
So about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I was a part of the Defense Civilian Emerging Leader Program.
Wonderful.
Where we went to Massachusetts about 6 or 7 times over the course of a year and learned just how to be a leader. And one of this model, this Eisenhower model, really stuck with me, and it and I actually recently just shared it with my team because
Mm-hmm.
it is important to me, and I used it as a just a way to really manage their tasks. And so I just find it to be an important tool for me in my toolbox to be a leader. I think trying to find values that are aligning with your job or your company or organization is important.
Yeah.
And any mismatches might not be the best fit for you.
Yes. That's really interesting, Tony, because it's so obvious, but do people really think about that when they're particularly early in their careers, right? When what you're focused on is getting employment, and then later in your career, you're looking, because of the phase of life that you're in, you may be looking for more stability. So you kind of put up with things that may be a mismatch. But if we think instead of how old are you, or where did you grow up, or what type of education do you have, if we're focused on what do you value, and do your values align with the mission, vision and goals of the organization, that has such a great potential to impact not just our satisfaction, but our performance. You've always been a very thoughtful, intelligent person. I'm curious about, 14 years ago when you started as like an extern, right?
I never, when I was a kid, I want to go into logistics. That doesn't happen.
I'm just picturing a very small child wearing like a perfectly ironed, starched white button up with a clipboard.
Yeah. Nerd. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, but yeah, I feel like I fell into it, and in some ways I've kind of been finding myself a little bit more along the way and what I think my strengths are. I really like supervision.
What do you like about it?
Leading the team and motivating the team to get the job done, and trying to link people together. It all comes down to, I think, communication and whatnot. But
that's exactly right. So I'm fond of saying that work is work. There are going to be aspects of the job that, even if you love the job itself, there will be parts of it that aren't your absolute favorite. What do you find most challenging in supervising people?
I think balancing, trying to do the whole programmatics thing, but also the evaluation of people and trying to keep track of everyone, and that it's a fair evaluation. So performance evaluations is always a
Yeah. I've recently landed on the language that leadership is balancing business goals and people needs.
Yeah.
And it's that, performance management is a kind of this wonderful learning laboratory in how to do that we have to have goals. We have to get stuff done because we're at work. And in your case, there is a deeply clear mission associated with it.
Sure.
But then you're also dealing with human beings who have needs and fallibility and preferences and bad days.
Yeah. So my satisfaction, and I think this is a testament to me being like, yeah, I love being a supervisor, is I got more satisfaction out of resolving a conflict than a milestone in the program, if that makes sense.
It does.
So
it does.
Getting two people to understand each other and communicate better, when maybe that was hard in the past or seemingly impossible, that was a much better feeling than just completing a program review or briefing in front of someone that I had to, so
yeah, you're right. That is a mark of somebody that doesn't just like leadership, but is, should be doing it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. We need more leaders like that. Even if I don't work there, I love hearing about leaders in any organization that have that type of passion because it makes us all better.
Exactly.
Right? Like regardless of where we live, what jobs we do, when there are leaders that are passionate about, are my people improving? Because that's, I think we could talk about that accomplishment, that shared accomplishment as an improvement.
And I think sometimes we need to check ourselves as leaders.
Tell me more.
So
I agree. Yeah. I want to hear what your thoughts are.
I mean, we go through the motions sometimes and just through our daily lives, but sometimes you just need to hear something like the Comfy Chair's first podcast to make you really think about how you are leading and checking yourself and being like, hey, I should be doing something differently now. It's time.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. We've talked about a lot of things, right?
Sure.
Ageism and values. Love the values conversation. A great tool, the Eisenhower box. But I do want to settle back because, when we first talked about you joining me in the Comfy Chairs, we were focused on generations. I think the question I have at the end of the day is talking about generations. Is it the right conversation?
I don't think so.
Tell me why.
I think we should be talking to people and individuals, and I'm a millennial, but in some ways I feel like I identify more as a I don't know, a boomer and a millennial and a Gen Z, whatever. So it's just depending on the day.
Yeah.
So
yeah, some of the research, they say what matters is not so much the year that you were born, the generation that you fall into, but the big historical events that you encounter.
Okay.
We can think in the last 100 years, there's some of the big ones, the JFK assassination, the Challenger explosion, 9/11.
Right.
The pandemic is going to become one.
Yep.
That is a touchstone that everyone shares.
Yes.
So there's that shared point of reference. Technology. That technology really influences what we could probably talk about as worldview, but also lifestyle. But then also how you were raised, parenting.
Right. And
Yeah.
where you were raised.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add on to that, it's just like traveling and getting other people's perspectives in life and going to different countries and experiencing different people, you'll find that people are more alike than not alike.
Yeah.
So that's something that's just really stuck with me because I've been fortunate to travel the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, and back to technology, even if you don't have the resources for global travel, we have access to so much information now and viewpoints and different types of thought and experience. It kind of disheartens me that it's in that landscape that we have headlines like, again, millennials have ruined the housing market.
Mm-hmm.
How can we say that when we carry like all of the human knowledge in our pockets every day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's unfair.
Yeah.
To
But
that group.
yeah, well, it's also just, I mean, funny enough, it's the way we're wired. We're human. We are all the same in that respect.
And I think society has latched on to those labels, and it's going to be hard to take those away.
Yeah, it is. I'm very excited to see that, like, Pew Research. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because I just found it yesterday, but McKinsey has released a report kind of along the same lines. I think it's called Generation What.
That's a good one.
Yeah. That we're seeing some of those kind of big names in consulting and research saying we need to back away from this.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's good for all of us at the end of the day, because it's going to let things like values and priorities, core values and things like, Eisenhower helping you prioritize your work, those can take center stage.
Right. Instead of having to worry about if Joe Schmo is going to walk in the first day and know how to use this computer.
Yeah.
That's just...
Well, you should have figured that out in the interview process. But, that's exactly right. I'm not going to make assumptions about what you know because I think your resume is telling me that you're 50 or older. Instead, what are our priorities?
Right.
What's most urgent and important? And what do we value?
Right.
That is the right conversation. There's a book I want to recommend to you. I may have a copy of it floating around somewhere. It's called Lynchpin by, I want to say it's Seth Godin. It's about being valuable, but not being indispensable. I think it really ties to that cohesion idea. I think it's one that you might find interesting to help you refine that cohesion concept, because that's a wonderful value for a leader to have.
Yeah, because I've experienced when things are not cohesive, and that is when the most drama and most just uneasy feeling across the team happens. So that's why I value that team works together and knows their part.
How would you like to end? What are your closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you. I very much enjoyed being a part of it, and I think that this is just a great tool that you're giving to people for free.
Thank you. That means so much. It really does. Yeah, it is. It is such a pleasure. In so many ways, I'm so grateful that you're giving me some time. But then also just seeing, I think about 15-year-old Tony.
Yeah.
Even 8 years ago, as confident as you were as our DJ, you've had so much happen in your life, personally and professionally. Getting to reconnect with you at this point, it's just a treat. It really is. It's a privilege.
And it's the right time too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure if I would have had the experiences to be able to talk about it today. And yeah, so I just gravitated towards the topics that you talked about in your first podcast, and I was like, I need to reach out because I want to talk.
Thank you. Well, we'll have to do this again.
Awesome.
Every leader has a responsibility to get to know their people. While some leaders may find the lens of generational differences useful, what really matters is nurturing understanding and trust with your team. So talk about what matters most to you and to each person, and be clear about your shared priorities. Employees of all ages will benefit from your efforts.